The threat arrives the moment the signal hit. Earth's orbital satellites, the world stopped. Breathing screens across every nation flickered to black and then turned white with an alien crest glowing in deep crimson light. The emblem spun slowly, revealing the ancient symbol of the Galactic Council, a name whispered only in conspiracy forums and dismissed by every scientist. Until now, the message began without introduction, without pity, and without hesitation. This is a declaration of interstellar violation. Your species has accelerated beyond permitted thresholds. Your technological progress is in breach of intergalactic statutes. 49 through 86. You have 30 Earth days to cease advancement or be neutralized by force. The voice was cold, metallic, yet something about it sounded ancient, as if it had traveled across galaxies, carrying weight from 1,000 civilizations. The signal cut off as suddenly as it appeared, leaving Earth in a stunned silence. Across the globe, chaos broke loose. Defense systems activated, countries blamed each other, social media exploded with panic, and prophets came out of hiding, screaming about the end times. News anchors cried live on camera, heads of state vanished into bunkers and underground shelters, while fighter jets took to the skies as if the threat was coming from above. But not everyone panicked, not everyone ran. In a quiet chamber deep under Geneva, a man in a black suit with silver streaks in his hair watched the transmission again. His name was Dr. Rayan Cross, the director of Earth's Unified Space Response, a program known only to a few world leaders and funded off the books for decades. Rayan sat still, his fingers steepled before his lips, his expression unreadable. The others in the room looked to him, waiting for orders, waiting for panic. But he only smiled, that strange calm smile that had earned him both admiration and fear over the years. "What do we do, sir?" asked Major Leon, who had served under him for years and had never seen him hesitate. But instead of shouting orders or drafting evacuation plans, Rayan leaned back, opened a small drawer, pulled out a sleek silver device and began typing something into it. "What are you doing?" Leon asked, trying to understand. "This man's calm in the face of galactic death, sending our reply," Rayan said softly, and pressed send on the device. A moment later, a second signal shot into the stars, encoded in frequencies only the Council could detect. It was brief, poetic, and deeply confusing. It read, "Thank you." That was it, just 2 words. The Council received the message minutes later in their high orbital citadel, suspended above the crystal clouds of Celeris Prime. Ancient alien diplomats representing over 50 species gathered in the Hall of Sanctions, a chamber lined with psychic marble that vibrated with emotional echoes. Hologram of Earth's response hovered in the air, flickering and still as one by one the delegates read the words aloud, each with growing disbelief. "Thank you, what does it mean?" asked High Chancellor Verith of the Jalmar Empire, his tentacles twitching nervously. "Are they mocking us? Are they suicidal? Are they trying to provoke war?" Others debated in high-pitched trills and guttural clicks, their translation devices scrambling to keep up. One delegate, a young Zalari with glowing blue eyes, tilted her head and said softly, "They're not afraid." She looked around, her wings twitching. "They thanked us for a threat. No one does that, no one except she." Stopped herself, but her eyes remained locked on the message back on Earth. The panic began to shift to confusion. Reporters now questioned the meaning behind the reply. Memes spread, online theories emerged from black hole worship to strategic bluffing. But within the secure halls of Earth's true leadership, the plan was already in motion. Rayan stood before a secure screen that showed hidden live feeds from around the world, laboratories coming alive, forgotten bunkers being opened, scientists who had been off-grid reappearing, and classified blueprints being pulled from the depths of quantum archives. He wasn't just responding, he was activating something built in the shadows over the last 70 years, something Earth had hoped never to use. "The Council expects fear," he whispered to himself, watching the lines of code scroll past on a tablet. "They expect us to tremble, but humanity does not evolve through fear. We evolve through pressure. We thrive in storms," they said. U.S. A storm now. We rise outside the underground complex. A storm did rage, thunder cracking over Geneva, but the lightning seemed to echo something deeper, something ancient, as if the Earth itself had heard the threat and was answering with a heartbeat. A pulse not of fear, but of fury above in the stars. The Council's fleet began moving slow, majestic warships, shifting into formation around the solar perimeter, but not entering, not yet. Waiting, watching, trying to understand why their message had been met with thanks instead of terror. And deep below the surface of Earth, Rayan Cross smiled again, because he knew something the Council did know, knew what it truly meant to be human. And he knew that those two words were not a bluff, they were a warning. Disguised as humility, a mask hiding a fire that had burned through every empire Earth had ever known. Thank you was not surrender, it was an invitation, and the countdown had just begun. The Council watches in the heart of the Galactic Council's orbital citadel. A storm was brewing, unlike any before it. High above the glowing rings of Celeris Prime, the Council's elite floated in chambers of gravity-altered glass, encased in technology that could warp space and fold dimensions. Yet, in that moment, none of their power stopped the cold ripple of confusion that moved through the room. The human message had arrived less than an hour ago, and still it echoed through every corridor of the political complex. Two words: thank you. No demand, no retreat. No surrender, no apology, just a calm, unsettling thank you, High Chancellor. Vareth floated in his thought pool, the oily liquid around him pulsing with his anxiety. He had seen hundreds of worlds fall at the sound of a single threat. Thousands of species had surrendered without question when faced with the weight of the Council's judgment, but humans, they had done the unthinkable. They had said thank you, and now every species in the chamber waited for his decision. They mock us, Vareth hissed, slamming his tentacles into the projection console. This is arrogance of the highest form. They dare to insult the Council's warning. The delegates from the crystal skin Varuan blinked slowly, their faces unreadable, or perhaps unimpressed. One of them, a tall, slender being known as Diplomat Alzin, spoke with a calm that cut through the tension. Perhaps, High Chancellor, the humans are not mocking us. Perhaps they have already prepared for war and are thanking us for giving them reason. Whispers turned into roars, alien languages clashing in the air, even with translator implants. Delegates could not hide the panic that laced their voices. Some demanded immediate retaliation, others urged caution. The humans were unpredictable, brutal, brilliant, and fast learners. The very fact that they had reached interstellar communication in such a short time frightened the elder races. Meanwhile, in a lower chamber, unseen by most, a younger delegate named Sarai of the Zalari watched the feed with quiet intensity. She had studied humanity for years, fascinated by their violent history and unmatched creativity. She watched war documentaries from Earth, wept at their music, marveled at their stories, and feared the fire in their nature. They were chaos, wrapped in curiosity, and they never ever gave up, she whispered to herself, remembering how they had risen from a single planet to machines that touched stars. She turned to her assistant, who hovered beside her, covered in holographic robes, and asked, "Do we have any deeper intelligence on Earth's defense preparations?" The assistant blinked and activated a hidden report sent by a spy probe stationed on Earth's moon. The footage was grainy, but unmistakable. A black ship not listed in any database had launched from Antarctica 2 hours after the Council's threat. No official communication followed, but the probe's final transmission before it went silent showed a note etched onto its hull in a language only humans used. It read, "Still thankful, Sarai." Felt a chill if a species replied to annihilation with thanks, and then launched a ship with the same message. They were not bluffing. They were planning. They were smiling into the abyss. Back on Earth, Dr. Rayan Cross stood in a dim chamber made of old stone reinforced with quantum steel around him. The core members of the Unified Space Response Team watched holograms of Council fleet positions. Blue dots danced across their screens, interwoven with red pulses marking humanity's silent ships. "Are we visible?" asked Captain Yelena Cross, leaning forward. No, Rayan replied without looking up. "Our cloak tech is at 89% opacity, which means to their scanners we look like deep space radiation." One of the technicians spoke from the far side of the chamber. "The prototype we launched reached the Oort cloud The feedback system was activated, and it dropped the payload just before we lost contact. Rayan nodded without emotion, then whispered, "Good, they'll know we are watching too." He walked toward a control panel and pulled up the Council's known armada formations, thousands of ships lined in perfect. Geometry predictable, coordinated, beautiful, but that was the flaw. Rayan thought they relied too much on order. Humans thrived in chaos. They built strategy out of mess, turned disorder into advantage. Where the Council saw elegance, humans saw patterns. And where the Council expected surrender, humans gave them gratitude. Outside the Earth, media had begun to shift in tone. Panic replaced by speculation. Television hosts now questioned what Earth knew that the aliens didn't. Conspiracy theorists claimed that the Unite was the start of a secret defense operation, while others called it a spiritual message of peace, but only a handful knew the truth. It was bait in the Galactic Council chambers. Verith finally made a decision: deploy observation-class vessels to Earth perimeter. He ordered, "Eyes only, do not engage yet. I want to see how far the humans are willing to push this." And so silver ships shaped like stars began to move through the cold darkness of space, not to attack, but to observe us. Array, meanwhile, requested access to the Terran archives secretly kept in the Council's forbidden library. She needed to understand the psychology behind this response, behind a species that laughed in war, wept in victory, and now replied to destruction with kindness. She pulled up files showing how humans had defeated threats on their own planet, wars that reshaped the face of Earth, disasters they turned into technology, pain they turned into power. In every instance, their species never bowed. It broke and then rose higher. She closed the file and whispered to herself, "We sent them fear, and they sent us thanks, because to them fear is just another challenge to beat." The Council thought Earth was the problem, but now some of them began to wonder, what if Earth was the test? What if those two words were not confusion, but a mirror, and what they would see in it might be their own and humanity's memory? The wind howled across the frozen plains of Antarctica as snow whipped through the air like knives, and deep below, the ice where no satellite could see a hidden base came alive with blinking lights and low mechanical hums. This was Site Greyfall, a place buried so far beneath the surface that even Earth's own governments denied it existed. Inside this steel and stone fortress were records that dated back to the very first signal Earth had ever received from beyond the stars. Long before the Galactic Council's threat, there had been others, and they were not peaceful. Dr. Rayan Cross stood in front of a sealed vault that required 2 biometric scans, a rotating key, and a phrase spoken in ancient Sanskrit. As the door slowly groaned open, cold air rushed past him, and for a moment, he felt like he was staring into the mouth of something ancient, something alive. This chamber was older than any official records, and built before humanity even admitted to having interstellar contact. Inside the vault were shelves lined with data crystals, holographic journals, and video logs, the kind that were never meant to be seen by the public. At the center of the room sat a single black chair surrounded by 10 projectors that only worked when powered by fusion nodes from the core of the planet. Rayan activated the system and sat down as the room darkened, and the first log flickered to life. The projection showed a younger version of himself, barely 30, in a dark suit, standing in a desert with ash falling from the sky. Behind him was a ruined city glassed by something not human, and the voice that came from the projection was tired yet firm. "This is Project Emberfall, Day 37. We have confirmed that the beings from the Proxima event are not part of the Galactic Council, nor do they communicate in any known pattern. They consume, they spread, they do not speak, they only grow, and Earth was never supposed to survive their arrival." Rayan paused the log and turned to Yelena Cross, who stood silently behind him. She had never seen these records before. She had only heard rumors from deep operatives. They never reported this to the UN. She said in disbelief, "They couldn't." Rayan replied, "The Council had already declared Earth under observation. We could not show them our scars." Yelena stepped forward and studied the frozen frame. Behind the younger Rayan stood a broken monument, once a tower of global peace, now reduced to melted metal. "How did we stop them?" she asked. "We Adapted, he answered softly. We didn't just fight, we evolved in days what others take centuries to understand. We turned desperation into progress. We turned every scream into signal data, every attack into strategy. They could not calculate emotion. They could not understand our chaos, and when they struck, we smiled and struck back harder. He pressed a button and another log played. This one showed Earth scientists building machines out of wreckage, using alien technology without manuals, using instinct alone. These beings were called the Hollow. They had no form, only hunger. They were the first and last enemy Earth faced before the Council ever noticed them. Something worse came after. Ryan moved to another case, opened a smaller container, and pulled out a single file. Marked Project Tico RNS. Inside were photos, maps, and a list of names all crossed out. These were the names of those who had encountered what they called the Mind Choir, a species that existed only in frequencies capable of altering thought, emotion, and memory. They could erase entire populations by singing through the ionosphere. But when they reached Earth, they failed because humanity had noise that they could not control. Earth's minds were not quiet. They were filled with rebellion, creativity, madness, love, pain, all tangled together in a way no psychic species had ever seen. And the Mind Choir's attempt to control failed, because their melody was drowned out by the thunder of human defiance. Rayan looked at Yelena again and said, "This is why we are not afraid of the Council." She stared at him and asked, "What exactly are we planning to let them see what we survived to? Let them realize that their warning came too late, and that their fear as well deserved." Above Earth, the Council's observation ships hovered silently, but one of them blinked red for a moment, and then dimmed. Inside the control chamber, an alien officer screamed in alarm. A stealth file had entered their ship, bypassed all firewalls, and simply placed a video on every screen in the ship. Video showed the Hollow burning in space, torn apart by plasma storms, then showed the Mind Choir screaming as their frequencies shattered. Then a message appeared in human English. "Thank you for giving us a reason to remember who we are." Rezaray, who watched from the main observation vessel, felt something shift deep inside her chest. This was not mockery. This was remembrance. The humans were not sending threats. They were sending mirrors showing the Council what Earth had been forced to become to survive in silence, without allies. They were not announcing power, they were announcing endurance. She turned to her assistant and whispered, "They have not declared war. They have declared identity back on Earth." Rayan stood before the archive wall, his voice echoing through the chamber. "They wanted to see fear. They will now see legacy. And when the Council finally understands what that thank you truly meant, they will never threaten us again." The Council divides. Hall of Sanctions inside the Galactic Council citadel had never been so loud since its creation eons ago, built with echo crystal walls to carry the voices of the mighty across time and space. It now trembled under the weight of chaos as alien delegates argued with desperation, fear, and disbelief. The great pillars that once held statues of unity were flickering with cracks of tension, and the Council, once a symbol of galactic order, was being pulled in two directions. One led to war, the other led to hesitation, and neither led to peace. High Chancellor Vareth stood above the rest, his eyes scanning the massive beings below him, but even he could not pretend to control the storm anymore. He banged his staff of judgment 3 times against the platform and demanded silence, but only a few stopped speaking. Some ignored him. Others looked to their own species' envoys for orders. It was clear the unity of the Council was dying, and something new was being born. One delegate from the scale-skinned Firun hissed across the chamber, "We must strike now before they activate whatever horrors they hide. Humanity is a sickness and hesitation. We'll let it spread." Another delegate from the blue light-based species called the Island calmly responded, "We do not understand them, which is precisely why we should not provoke them. If they thanked us for threatening their lives, imagine what they will do if we actually attack." The entire Council room pulsed with indecision. Fear clawed at reason, while anger bit at diplomacy. And in the center of it all, Sarai of the Zalari remained quiet, her wings folded, her eyes scanning the new transmission. From Earth this time, Earth had not sent words. They had sent a device. A Council scout ship had intercepted it just beyond. Pluto, a smooth black sphere, no larger than a melon, floating through the void, with no propulsion, no heat, no signature, and when scanned it revealed nothing until brought aboard. That was when the sphere opened and projected a hologram that paralyzed the ship's crew with images of things they could not explain. They saw human soldiers walking calmly into storms that melted metal. They saw children drawing pictures beside radioactive lakes without fear. They saw elders smiling inside gravity ruptures, waving at the stars as if they had already won, and above them always floated the phrase, "Thank you for reminding us." Ryan Cross had chosen every frame, carefully, not to threaten, not to boast, but to show the Council something deeper, something terrifying. Humanity had not simply prepared for war, they had trained themselves to make pain into purpose, and now the Council watched as Earth flipped the entire narrative upside down. What was meant to break them had only awakened them, and what was sent as control had become invitation. Vareth slammed his staff again and roared, "Enough! Will not watch this Council crumble over a primitive species. They are clever, yes, but not invincible, and I will not let the Council be humiliated by apes with fancy toys." Called for a vote on war, but only half the hands rose. The others looked away. One by one, delegates began to speak of what Earth had done to other invaders, of how they turned each enemy into a lesson, and each loss into a weapon. And then came Sarah Yeesh rose from her seat and stepped into the center of the floor, her presence small but her voice unwavering. "When I was a child," she began, "I watched a recording of a human girl whose planet was falling apart. She had lost everything, and yet she smiled at the sky and said, 'Maybe tomorrow will be better.' That sentence haunted me because it made no sense. It was illogical, it was naive, and yet it was powerful." She looked at every face in the room. "You do not fear humanity because they build fast or because they are violent. You fear them because they refuse to break. They thank us for threats because threats give them reason to grow, and you know it. You know it because you see it in every message." Everett sneered and called her speech emotional weakness, but many in the room had already shifted in their seats, already questioning his authority. Meanwhile, on Earth, Rayan stood in the upper chamber of Greyfall, watching as the hidden fleet prepared for a silent launch. Hundreds of black ships made from materials the Council had never seen before, built in the shadows of forgotten oceans and abandoned mines. Each ship bore the same words engraved into its hull, not in English, not in any alien script, but in code that translated universally across species. We learned fast, and beside them floated drones releasing quantum dust into space, dust that interfered with long-range Council sensors and spread Earth's influence without weapons, without noise, without permission. Dr. Cross spoke to his team with calm precision. "They expect us to strike first. They expect defiance. What they do not expect is reflection. We will send them one more message." He held up a small cube and activated it. At that moment, every screen in the Council citadel flickered, and a new message appeared. It showed a human woman planting trees where bombs had fallen, a blind boy learning music beside a crater where alien weapons had landed. It showed people laughing, dancing, creating in places where the Council believed only fear could grow. Then a final sentence appeared: "You gave us reason to remember who we are, and for that we offer our thanks." Silence fell across the stars, and something inside the Council began to break, not from war, but from awakening. Humanity steps forward. The moment the Galactic Council received Earth's final message, everything shifted. The vast hall that once echoed with the voices of great species now felt cold and empty as the broadcast flashed across every screen across the chamber. The final words burned into every delegate's mind, but it wasn't the images of peace that shook them. It was the realization that Earth had just done what no one else dared. They had chosen to show who they truly were. In every corner of the galaxy, other species watched with growing unease. The transmission was a beacon. It was Not an act of aggression, it was not a plea for mercy, it was an invitation to understand, a challenge to look deeper into the nature of humanity, and in doing so, it exposed the cracks in the Council's unity. High Chancellor Verith stood frozen at the center of the room, the words on the screen replaying over and over in his mind. You gave us reason to remember who we are, and for that we offer our thanks. Those words pierced him sharper than any weapon ever could, because they made him realize something the Council could never fully understand. Humanity was not afraid of death. It was not afraid of defeat, but what terrified Earth more than anything was losing its identity, and in that moment, the Council had become the ones who had threatened. Its array stood off to the side, her wings folded tightly, as she looked at the faces of the delegates she had fought for peace, for unity. But now she saw only confusion in their eyes, a growing fear that they could not hide anymore. The real question was not whether Earth would fight back, it was whether the Council could adapt fast enough to understand why humanity had chosen this path. She stepped forward and broke the silence. It is not their weapons that make them dangerous, she said slowly. It is their willingness to evolve through struggle. Humanity does not fear war, they fear losing their soul. The Council did not respond to her immediately. Verith's grip tightened on his staff, his voice shaking as he addressed the room. No, they are testing us. They are showing weakness. They are sending us peace in the form of a challenge. This is not the humanity. We know this is not how they should act. They should be cowering, not smiling at the face of extinction. But Sarai's words had already begun to stir something in the room among those who still feared Earth's power. Others now saw the truth behind the messages. Humanity had already fought wars far more devastating than the Council had ever imagined, and they had risen from those ashes stronger than before. Earth's history was a testament to that resilience. From the fire of 100 battles, the spirit of survival had burned brightly. From the ashes of loss, the flame of invention had risen stronger, and with every setback they found a new way to move forward. That was the real gift they had given the galaxy. They had learned to turn their worst trials into their greatest triumphs, and in doing so, they had changed the definition of what it meant to survive. Transmissions had shown not just pictures, but stories of those who had lost everything but still moved forward, stories of children who played under the shadow of war, stories of families who rebuilt after devastation, stories of warriors who fought not for victory, but for the survival of their identity in the depths of the Council's citadel. The fear was no longer about Earth's weapons, but about their legacy. Earth had proved that survival was more than just brute force. It was an art, a dance between destruction and creation, and it was something the Council had never fully understood. And then Earth took its final step forward. Ryan Cross stood before a new type of communication system, a direct line to the Galactic Council. This time there were no words, no images, just a pulse of energy that traveled through the network. A simple pulse that could be felt across the stars. Was a call not for war, but for understanding. The screen before him flickered and slowly came to life, showing the faces of the Galactic Council's highest officials, a mirror of 1,000 species, each struggling with the same question. Could we understand? Earthrian stood tall, his eyes locked onto the holographic display. As he spoke, we know you are afraid of us, but we are not your enemy. We only ask for one thing. We ask for the opportunity to be heard. We are not here to rule. We are here to learn. We are not here to conquer. We are here to grow. The silence stretched on for a moment too long, and then a voice came through the screen, a voice that no one expected to hear. It was Sirayush stepped forward into the light of the hologram. Her wings unfolded, and her voice was calm but firm. Ryan Cross speaks the truth. We are not your enemies, but we cannot be your servants either. Earth has risen above your expectations, and now it is time for us all to rise together. Room was still. The entire galaxy watched as the representatives of the Galactic Council stood frozen in time, each species knowing that what was happening here would change everything. And then slowly, one by one, delegates began to speak, not with anger, but with curiosity and with respect. We were wrong. One delegate from the Firan said softly, we underestimated Earth's resilience. Another spoke, we were too quick to judge. You said another, but we see now that you are not a threat. You are a lesson. The High Chancellor Vareth stood, silent for a long moment. Before he finally spoke, his voice was softer than it had ever been before. Perhaps we have been looking at this all wrong, he said quietly. Perhaps we have been afraid of what you represent, because we do not understand it. But now I see that humanity does not represent chaos. It represents something we have lost. Hope in something that might yet save us all. Rayan Cross smiled. The war was never about weapons. It was never about superiority. It was about identity, and humanity had shown the universe what true survival meant. It was about adapting to the unknown, evolving beyond fear, and above all, it was about refusing to lose what you are. And as the Council finally began to open its eyes to the truth, Earth's message became clear. Thank you for understanding. The new order. The stars above Earth had once been a distant hope, a dream unreachable, but now they were within grasp, within the reach of a species that had shown the galaxy not just how to survive, but how to thrive against all odds. The Galactic Council had been shaken to its core, and Earth was no longer just a participant in the universe. It was now the teacher. For days after the final broadcast from Rayan Cross, the Galactic Council remained in deliberation, their great hall no longer a place of unity, but a chamber of transformation, each representative now questioning everything they had ever known and the vast empire they had built. The messages from Earth had left a mark deeper than any weapon could have. The Council no longer saw humanity as a threat, but as a mirror reflecting the flaws of every species present. Saray had been the first to speak on behalf of Earth, and in doing so she had changed the course of history. As she stood before the Council, now she spoke not as a delegate of her people, but as a witness to something greater, something that no one could have predicted. Humanity had not just been surviving, it had been evolving at a speed that none of them had fully understood. They had adapted to every crisis they had faced. Every obstacle that came their way had been turned into fuel for their growth, and now Earth had reached a place where it could no longer be ignored, nor could it be contained. What humanity has taught us is not about weapons or power, but about something much more profound. She said, her voice steady and clear. They have shown us the value of resilience. They have shown us the power of never surrendering, the power of rebuilding, and the power of evolving through every challenge that life throws at them. The Council listened in silence, the reality of what had happened settling over them like a heavy fog. Each member now aware that Earth's journey had not just been one of survival, but one of transformation. Something the Council had never fully appreciated until now. The high chambers, once filled with debates about war and dominance, were now filled with whispers of peace and cooperation. The final message from Earth had broken through the barriers that had kept the galaxy at war for centuries, and now the Council had to decide what path to take. It was then that Rayan Cross appeared on the main screen, his face calm and composed as always, but there was something different in his eyes, something that conveyed both wisdom and peace. His voice echoed through the hall as he addressed the Council. We are not here to conquer your worlds. We are not here to destroy what you have built. We are here to learn and to share the lessons we have learned with you. We are here to stand beside you as equals, not as subordinates. We do not seek to rule. We seek to grow together. His words were simple, but they carried weight, and with them came a new truth. Council had to confront it. Was not just about domination or victory. It was about unity, about understanding that every species had something to offer and something to learn. The transformation was not easy. It never was. The Council had built its power on control and order, but now it had to consider something new, something that had been forgotten in the pursuit of dominance. It had to consider the value of individuality, the power of diversity, the strength of each species bringing its own unique perspective to the table. And so the Council voted for the first time in its history. It voted not for war, but for collaboration, for the creation of a new order, one where each species could grow on its own terms, but also stand together in solidarity and respect. Rayan Cross watched the vote unfold on the screen, his eyes never leaving the display as the final count was tallied. And the results were clear. The galaxy was shifting. The Council had accepted Earth as an equal. They had recognized the value of humanity's spirit, the value of their will to survive and to evolve. When the vote ended, the chamber was silent for a long moment. No one knew what to say, no one knew how to react. But then slowly, one by one, the delegates stood and began to applaud. It was a slow, hesitant clap at first, but as the realization spread, the applause grew louder, and soon the entire hall was filled with the sound of approval and acceptance. Humanity had not just survived, it had become the cornerstone of a new era of cooperation, the era of understanding and unity. As the applause died down, Vareth, the High Chancellor of the Council, stepped forward, his voice no longer filled with anger or fear, but with respect. "We were wrong about you, humanity," he said, his voice steady. "We thought you were a threat. But we now see you for what you truly are, a lesson for all of us. You have taught us that survival is not about dominance. It is about evolving. It is about growing together. And we thank you for that." Rayan Cross smiled and nodded in response. "Thank you for listening," he said simply, and with that the final barriers fell. The Council now recognized Earth not as a threat, but as a teacher, not as a conqueror, but as a partner in a new chapter of galactic history. The years that followed were ones of great change. Earth's influence spread across the stars, but not with weapons, not with threats, but with ideas. Earth's way of thinking became the foundation for new alliances, new civilizations, and new ways of living together in peace. And as humanity took its place among the stars, it was clear that the greatest gift they had given the universe was not their strength or their ingenuity. It was their ability to inspire others to evolve, to show that even in the darkest moments, even when faced with the greatest threats, there was always room for growth, always room for change. "Thank you for showing us the way," said Soraya as she stood beside Rayan Cross, her voice full of respect and admiration. "Thank you for letting us remember who we are." And with that, Earth became more than just a planet among the stars. It became the symbol of what was possible when a species chose to evolve, not just in power, but in spirit. Final lesson: the galaxy had changed forever in the wake of Earth's final message. The new order was now in place, but not everyone understood it. Not every species had fully embraced the truth that had been shared that day in the Galactic Council's hall. The lessons learned were still fresh and raw. Many still clung to the old ways of power and control, but those who had listened, those who had truly seen humanity for what it was, knew that Earth had shown them something powerful, something that could not be ignored. Rayan Cross stood before the vast window of the newly established Earth Embassy on Celeris Prime. The city below was alive with activity, the streets filled with representatives of dozens of species, and the air buzzed with conversations in 100 different languages. Earth's presence had begun to reshape the political landscape of the galaxy, but not through war, not through force, but through ideas and unity. He looked out at the horizon and felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that humanity had played a role in creating something bigger than itself. He turned away from the window and walked toward the center of the embassy, where Sarai stood waiting, her wings folded behind her with a quiet grace. "I never thought I would see the day when the Council would accept a species as unpredictable as humanity," she said softly. Rayan smiled. "The universe has a way of surprising us all. Sometimes humanity has always been unpredictable, but that's what makes us strong. We never follow the path others expect of us. We carve our own way forward, and that's what the galaxy needed to understand." The sound of footsteps approached, and they both turned to see the High Chancellor Vareth entering the room, his face no longer the mask of fear and anger, but something more genuine, something that resembled respect. "Rayan Cross," he said, his voice calm and measured, "we may not agree on everything, but I now see the strength in your species. I see the power of your adaptability and your unwavering belief in yourselves. You have shown us a path forward, a path that we could not see before." Rayan nodded in acknowledgement and stepped forward, extending his hand. "It is not just us, Chancellor, it's all of us together. Earth's strength lies in its ability to bring different worlds together, to unite rather than divide. We have learned from our past mistakes, and we are ready to help others do the same. Varith hesitated for a moment before shaking Rayan's hand. The gesture was simple, but it carried weight more than any treaty or alliance could ever express. It seems we have much to learn from you, and in that moment, the final lesson had been learned. Galaxy would never be the same again. Earth's influence would continue to grow, but not through the might of its weapons or the strength of its fleets, but through the power of its ideas, its resilience, and its ability to teach others how to survive and thrive in a universe that was vast and full of unknowns. As Earth stepped forward into this new era of unity and cooperation, it did not forget the lessons of its past. It did not forget the struggles, the battles, the losses, and the victories. For it was those very experiences that had shaped humanity into the species it was today, and it was those experiences that would guide humanity as it continued to evolve and grow. Alongside the rest of the galaxy, Ryan stood at the center of the embassy. Now surrounded by diplomats and leaders from all corners of the galaxy, they all looked to him, not with fear or suspicion, but with respect and admiration. Humanity had come a long way from its humble beginnings on a single planet to becoming a beacon of hope and inspiration for the entire galaxy. And as Rayan looked around at the faces before him, he knew that this was only the beginning. This was only the start of a new chapter in the story of Earth and its place in the cosmos. Final lesson was clear. Strength was not found in the ability to conquer or dominate. It was found in the ability to adapt, in the ability to learn from every experience, to rise from every fall, and to never lose sight of who you truly were. Humanity had shown the galaxy that survival was not just about living, it was about thriving. It was about finding meaning in the struggle and transforming that struggle into something beautiful, something worth fighting for. New Order was not one of dominance, it was one of cooperation, a galaxy united not by force, but by understanding, and the realization that every species had something valuable to offer, something to contribute to the greater whole. And so, as Rayan Cross looked to the stars once more, he knew that humanity had not just survived the Council's threat, they had used it as an opportunity to show the universe what it truly meant to live, to evolve, to be human. Thank you for giving us the chance to prove ourselves, he thought to himself silently, and with that thought, the final chapter of the story was written and the universe began a new era, one that was shaped not by war or fear, but by the enduring power of hope and unity. The universe had been forever changed by the story of Earth and its rise from the ashes of threat and fear. The Galactic Council had once looked down on humanity, seeing them as a mere speck in the vast expanse of the cosmos. But now they saw something different. Now they saw a species that refused to be defined by anything but its own will, a species that had shown the galaxy what it meant to survive, to adapt, and to evolve. No longer was Earth a world on the brink of destruction. It had become the cornerstone of a new order, one where survival was not about dominance, but about unity, about standing together to face the unknown and to embrace the diversity that made each species unique and valuable. Rayan Cross stood once more before the window of Earth's embassy on Celeris Prime, looking out at the stars and seeing them not as distant dreams, but as a future filled with possibilities. He had led humanity through the darkest moments, and now they stood on the precipice of a new age. Beside him, Sarai stood, her wings folded in quiet contemplation. She had seen the potential in humanity long before the Council had, and now she watched as they took their place among the stars as equals, not as conquerors but as partners. The universe had always been a place of uncertainty, a place of constant change and conflict, but humanity had shown that even in the face of fear, there was always room for hope and for growth. As the new era unfolded across the galaxy, new alliances were formed, new discoveries were made, and species that had once been enemies now stood side by side to build a future together, a future that was not defined by war or by conquest, but by collaboration and understanding. And as Earth took its place among the stars, it was clear that the true power of humanity was not in its weapons or its technology, it was in its heart. Its spirit, its ability to overcome and to inspire others to do the same. Thank you for showing us the way humanity had said to the galaxy, and with that simple message the universe had been forever changed. The end.